You're at your job and you hear something. Not directly. Through whispers. Through careful conversations that stop when certain people walk by. Someone important, someone with authority, someone everyone depends on for their livelihood has done something that crosses a line, something that hurts people. And you know it's true because you can see it in how people behave around this person. The tension, the carefulness, the way certain employees avoid being alone with them. And you wait. You wait for someone to do something, for HR to act, for management to step in, for consequences to materialize, but they don't. Days pass, weeks pass, and nothing happens. And slowly you realize that everyone knows, management knows, HR knows, the executives know, but they're not doing anything. They're protecting this person, actively protecting them. And you wonder, how does that happen? How do good people, reasonable people, people who would never personally harm anyone, end up protecting someone who does? I think about this question a lot, not in a judgmental way, more in a confused way. Because it's one thing to understand that one person can be harmful. We all get that. Harmful people exist. But what's harder to understand is why entire groups of people, entire institutions, entire systems organize themselves around protecting those harmful people. Why do bystanders become enablers? Why do witnesses become defenders? Why does knowledge of harm so often lead not to accountability but to cover-up? And the easy answer is to say, those people are corrupt. They're complicit. They're bad. But I don't think that's usually true. I think most people protecting abusers aren't evil. They're just trapped in a logic that makes protection feel necessary, feel rational, feel like the only option. And that logic is what I want to sit with for a while. Because I think understanding it might be more important than judging it. There was a philosopher, Hannah Arendt, who wrote about something she called the banality of evil. And her point was that most evil doesn't come from monsters. It comes from ordinary people following systems, following orders, following procedures. Not because they're sadistic, but because they're obedient. Because they're invested in the system functioning. And when the system decides that protecting a powerful abuser is necessary for its own stability, ordinary people will protect the abuser, not gleefully, just mechanically, just doing their jobs. And I think that's what we're seeing in workplaces, in institutions, in industries. People aren't protecting abusers because they approve of abuse. They're protecting abusers because the abuser is important to the system. And the system's survival feels more important than any individual's suffering. And so the suffering gets minimized, explained away, reframed as complicated, until everyone can live with it. Until everyone can keep going to work, keep collecting paychecks, keep pretending everything is fine. You see this in how these situations get discussed. When someone powerful is accused, the conversation immediately shifts from what did they do to what's the impact going to be. Not the impact on the victim, the impact on the organization, on projects, on funding, on reputation. And suddenly everyone is doing risk assessment, damage control, figuring out how to minimize disruption, and the person who was harmed, they become part of the disruption, part of the problem to be managed. There's this dark joke about a company that discovers their star employee has been harassing people, and they have a meeting to discuss it. And someone says, "Well, we need to do the right thing." And everyone nods. And then someone else says, "But he brings in 40% of our revenue." And there's a long silence. And then someone says, "So what's the right thing?" And everyone laughs uncomfortably, because they all know the answer has already changed. The right thing is now whatever keeps that 40% of revenue, and the person who was harmed will need to understand, will need to be reasonable, will need to accept a settlement and sign an NDA and move on quietly so the really important work can continue. And this isn't hypothetical. This is documented. This is the pattern, over and over across industries. The powerful person is protected, because removing them would cost more than tolerating them. And the cost isn't measured in human suffering. It's measured in money, in projects, in convenience. And by that math, protection always wins. Arendt wrote about how systems make people thoughtless, not stupid, thoughtless. They stop thinking about the human reality of what they're doing and start thinking only in terms of procedure, of policy, of what the system requires. And when you're thinking that way, protecting an abuser isn't a moral choice. It's just logistics, just problem solving, just doing what needs to be done to keep things running. I think about the people in those meetings, the HR professionals, the executives, the board members, and I don't think they're all sociopaths. I think most of them are probably decent in their personal lives, probably kind to their families, probably donate to charity, probably consider themselves good people. But when they sit in that conference room and decide to protect someone who caused harm, they're not thinking about good and evil. They're thinking about liability, about optics, about organizational stability. And in that frame, protection makes sense. It's rational, it's responsible leadership. And the victim is also being thought about, but not as a person, as a problem that needs solving. And the solution isn't justice. The solution is silence, compensation, relocation, whatever makes the problem go away without disrupting the system, without requiring the system to change, without acknowledging that maybe the system itself is what made the abuse possible in the first place. There's something darkly efficient about how this works. The powerful abuser is valuable. Removing them creates problems. The victim is not valuable in the same way. Removing them creates no problems. So the path of least resistance is to keep the abuser and lose the victim. And that path gets smoothed by legal departments and HR protocols and settlement negotiations until it feels like everyone did their best in a difficult situation, until everyone can sleep at night, until the system can keep running. And this is where it gets really uncomfortable. Because I think most systems don't just tolerate powerful abusers. They prefer them. Not consciously, not explicitly, but structurally. Because the kind of person who becomes powerful in most systems is often the kind of person who's willing to cross lines that others won't, who's willing to be aggressive, demanding, uncompromising, who doesn't let things like other people's feelings get in the way of results. And those traits, the same traits that make someone effective at climbing hierarchies and delivering outcomes, are often the same traits that make someone capable of abuse. So the system selects for people with those traits, promotes them, rewards them, protects them, and then acts shocked when those same traits manifest as harm. But it's not shocking. It's predictable. The system created conditions where that behavior would thrive, and now the system has to protect that behavior, because the system needs it, needs the results, needs the revenue, needs the wins. And if protecting abuse is the price of getting those wins, that's a price the system is willing to pay, as long as someone else pays it. Michel Foucault wrote about power, about how it's not just about force, it's about shaping reality, shaping what people think is normal, what they think is acceptable, what they think is just how things are. And I think that's how powerful abusers stay protected. The people around them slowly adjust their sense of normal, slowly accept that this person is difficult, demanding, has a temper, crosses boundaries, and those things stop being seen as abuse and start being seen as just their personality, just how they are, just the cost of working with someone brilliant or important or successful. And once that shift happens, once abuse has been normalized as personality, protecting the abuser doesn't feel like protecting abuse. It feels like making accommodations for a difficult but valuable person. It feels like being understanding, being mature, being realistic about the fact that talent comes with flaws, and you can't expect perfection from high performers. And the people being harmed, they need to be more resilient, more professional, more capable of handling difficult personalities, because that's just the reality of working at this level. You can see this play out in public now, online. When powerful people get accused, the defenses come immediately. He's under a lot of pressure. She's dealing with a lot. You don't know what it's like to have that much responsibility. They're being targeted. This is a hit job. This is jealousy. This is people who can't handle strong personalities. And those defenses work, not because they're true, but because they give people permission to keep protecting, keep defending, keep investing in the person they've already invested in. Because admitting that person did harm would mean admitting they enabled it, ignored it, benefited from it, and that's too uncomfortable to face. There's this cognitive dissonance people experience. They know someone they respect, someone they work with, someone they've supported, did something terrible, and their brain can't reconcile that. So it splits. On one hand, the evidence. On the other hand, their relationship with this person. And instead of letting the evidence change the relationship, they let the relationship reframe the evidence. It becomes complicated, nuanced, not what it seems. Taken out of context, exaggerated, weaponized, anything but what it actually is, which is harm. Clear, documentable, witnessed harm. And the people doing this reframing aren't monsters, they're just humans doing what humans do. Protecting their investments, their relationships, their worldview, their sense that they're good judges of character, their belief that they would never associate with an abuser. And so the abuser must not actually be an abuser. Or if they are, it must be complicated, must be partially the victim's fault, must be something less than what it appears to be. Because the alternative is too destabilizing. Arendt called this thoughtlessness. This ability to participate in harm while maintaining your self-image as a good person. And it works because you're never asked to confront the harm directly. You're just asked to follow procedure, to respect privacy, to let legal handle it, to trust that the people above you are doing the right thing. And you do. Because questioning them would be uncomfortable, would risk your position, would mark you as difficult, as not a team player, as someone who doesn't understand how things work. And so everyone protects, everyone enables, everyone participates in a system that consistently chooses powerful abusers over the people they harm. And everyone feels bad about it. Everyone wishes it were different, but nobody changes anything. Because changing would require admitting the system is broken. And if the system is broken, what does that say about everyone who's succeeded in it? What does that say about you? I think about the person who heard those whispers at work, who knows someone powerful is causing harm, and I think about the choice in front of them. Speak up and risk everything, or stay quiet and keep your job, your relationships, your stability. And I don't judge people who choose silence, because I understand the math. I understand that heroes are expensive, that integrity is a luxury, that most people are just trying to survive. And survival usually means going along, staying quiet, protecting the people you're supposed to protect, even when they don't deserve it. But I also think about the cost of that survival, the cost of all those individual silences adding up to institutional cover-up, the cost of good people doing nothing, becoming indistinguishable from bad people doing harm, the cost of systems that function by sacrificing the vulnerable to protect the powerful. And I wonder, at what point does the cost become too high? At what point do enough people say no? At what point does protection become impossible because too many people refuse to participate? And I don't know the answer. I don't know if there's a tipping point. I don't know if systems can change or if they just protect themselves until they collapse under their own corruption. I don't know if people can overcome the institutional logic that makes protecting abusers feel necessary. I don't know if thoughtlessness can be cured, or if it's just a permanent feature of how hierarchies work. What I do know is this. Every time you see a powerful abuser being protected, you're not seeing one bad person being shielded by a conspiracy of evil. You're seeing a system working as designed. You're seeing ordinary people following ordinary incentives. You're seeing the banality of evil, the thoughtlessness, the prioritization of stability over justice. And you're seeing why changing that is so hard. Because it's not about convincing people to be good. Most people already think they're good. It's about changing systems that make protection rational and accountability disruptive. And maybe that's impossible. Maybe systems always protect power, because that's what systems do. Maybe the question isn't why do humans protect powerful abusers, but how could they possibly not, given the incentives, the structures, the logic of institutional self-preservation? Or maybe not. Maybe something shifts. Maybe enough people refuse. Maybe enough institutions face consequences. Maybe the cost of protection finally exceeds the cost of accountability. And maybe systems learn, slowly, painfully, that sacrificing the vulnerable to protect the powerful isn't stability, it's just delayed collapse. But that hasn't happened yet. Not broadly, not consistently. And until it does, powerful abusers will keep being protected. Not by evil people, by ordinary people. Following ordinary systems. Doing what feels necessary, what feels rational, what everyone else is doing. And maybe understanding that is the beginning of something, or maybe it isn't, but it's true. And sitting with that truth, uncomfortable as it is, seems important, even if it changes nothing. Even if tomorrow brings another story of another powerful person being protected by another institution full of ordinary people doing what systems require. It's still true. And truth, even when it costs everything, is still the only thing worth holding on to.